Hello, everybody. This is your host Karthik, and I'm starting a completely new show and series. It's called Cricket Nostalgia. This is where we would go talk on cricket stories that were there from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And how apt that I invite somebody on the inaugural edition of the show. Aditya is somebody whom I see as. Robolinda for the cricket literature world, simply because all of his cricket books have touched upon topics of cricket that we've probably not visually seen. So Aditya is a three-time cricket book writer. His third book on Aunshuman Gaikwad is about to launch. He's already written a couple of books on Colonel CK Nayudu as well as the Indian spin quartet. So Aditya, welcome to the show, and I'm just curious to understand, how did this book come about? How did the whole idea of the book come about?
Thanks, Karthik. It's lovely to be here and flattery to be compared with the legend of Twitter, as we say on the videos. So the journey with Mr. Gaikwad started when I was interviewing him for certain other things. And as part of my research, I figured out that not much has been written about him. Of course, we the fans of the 90s relate him as the Indian coach.
Absolutely.
At that golden era, coinciding with Sachin Tendulkar in great form, Saurav Ganguly, we won so many tournaments, not to forget the Desert Storm. And but when I was researching, I realized that there is a lot more about him. Yes, there are few articles there about some of the famous innings that he had played, but that doesn't tell what the man was and how did he really become the gutsy player that everyone calls him. And that's when I thought that I'll request him for this biography, and he thought about it and then he agreed. And after that, it has been a lovely journey.
Right. Even I'm curious to understand more about Aunshuman Gaikwad, and I'm sure it's the same for some of our listeners. But yes, I'm seeing that Aunshuman Gaikwad started off as an off spinner and then made his way into the side. So how did that happen? That you get picked as a spinner, and then you move your way up the side, because we've seen this happen with W.V. Raman. I think he started off similarly as a spinner in the Chennai Test, where I think Hirvani also made his debut, and made his way up. Similar probably with Ravi Shastri too. How did this particular case happen?
Well, I think the only difference here is that Mr. Gaikwad, when he came into the Indian team, he came as a middle order batsman.
Okay.
But when he started his first class career, he was batting at number 9 for Baroda as an off spinner. And that time Baroda wasn't a very strong side. Right. So more often than not, the lower order had to do something. And when he started performing well, slowly he was promoted up the order as in the middle order. In fact, he made his India debut also as a middle order batsman. It was only in 1976 when, due to certain circumstances within the team think tank thought that he's the most suited to accompany Mr. Gavaskar. And remember that was a time when Mr. Gavaskar's opening partners used to change after every series. So the team was looking for a solid pair. I think after Chetan Chauhan, we were not able to find a regular opening partner for Mr. Gavaskar. And that's when Aunshuman Gaikwad came into the picture.
Right. Usually when you talk of Baroda, right, I'm thinking that Baroda always had wicket keepers for some reason that would make it to the Indian team, and then you'd have middle order batsmen. And of course, I think, was Nayan Mongia also from Baroda?
That's right.
So, of course, Nayan Mongia and Kiran More from popular context in the late 80s and early 90s is what comes to mind when it comes to Baroda. But it's interesting that we've had Aunshuman Gaikwad, who started off as a middle order bat, has come to the top in the opening. But yes, that seems to be an interesting thing, because very few people make that transition from being a middle order bat to going in international cricket and opening. We saw that with Virender Sehwag too, eventually over time. Though he made his debut at number 6, he succeeded, and today we know him as an opener. Of course, I think at that point, someone like Saurav Ganguly felt that someone like Viru needed to blossom as a player. But what was the role that was expected? Because you already had somebody very senior like Sunil Gavaskar, who had, I think, by then spent 5-6 years already making, I think, his India debut. What were the conditions in which you are privy of as somebody who's writing this biography of Aunshuman Gaikwad? What were the conditions that led him to open for India?
So it was the famous series of India to West Indies in 1976. And we all know about that famous chase of 400 at Port of Spain, which is part of our cricketing legacy now. And prior to that test match, India had tried, in the earlier test matches, India had tried a couple of openers. They did not succeed. Parthasarathi Sharma had been tried. Dilip Vengsarkar had been tried. They did not succeed. And prior to this test match, in one of the tour games, Mr. Gaikwad scored a century. So just before the test match, the captain Bishen Singh Bedi, manager Polly Umrigar, and Sunil Gavaskar approached Mr. Gaikwad that in the team, probably after Gavaskar, Vishwanath, and Amarnath, he is the one with the most solid technique, and the team needs him to open and provide a solid opening partnership with Mr. Gavaskar. Being the team man that he always has been, always thinking about Indian cricket, he agreed that fine, I'll give it a shot. And again, that was a time the West Indies were obviously on the top of the world with fast bowlers.
Absolutely.
The greatest fast bowlers. And these batsmen that time had no protective gear. Forget about helmets. There wasn't even basic protective gear. But Mr. Gaikwad took it in his stride and said that, okay, I'm going to open. And when India chased down that total of 400, he opened along with Mr. Gavaskar. They had a more than 50-run partnership, which really helped helped in a great way to settle the nerves in the team, and also for the West Indies. They thought that India would never chase 400.
Right.
So, it's going to be a cakewalk. And when this opening partnership, they definitely started feeling the heat slowly.
Right. I'm reminded of those times. I think you had Michael Holding, Wayne Daniel.
That's right.
And to go and face these kind of fast bowlers actually takes my mind back to my popular memory of suddenly blooding somebody in the top order in very pacer friendly conditions. I remember Sanjay Bangar was sent up in the Headingley Test match of 2002, and even though it wasn't like a big knock, people remember that knock for the bravery. He gave that support to Rahul Dravid. So what was Aunshuman Gaikwad's memories opening up? Did he say anything specific to you, or have you written any passage in the book that talks about his thoughts as someone like Michael Holding runs into bowl, or Wayne Daniel is bowling bouncers? Because it's one thing to survive that, right? I mean, like, what an amazing pace quartet that they had.
Absolutely. I mean, he has told, there are many stories that he has told, some of which have been covered in the book, some of which haven't been covered in the book. But there are two aspects. One is that he was pretty solid. I mean, he was always ready to take up challenges. So today, when talking to me, he said, if I look back, I feel scared that how did I do it? But that time there wasn't that thinking. And the second thing was that with Sunil Gavaskar at the other end, and Aunshuman Gaikwad has always maintained that having a player like Sunil Gavaskar at the other end, watching him bat, makes things look very easy. So Sunil Gavaskar could do things which many other batsmen wouldn't be able to do. And as an opening partner, you're seeing, oh, my partner is able to do it, so let me also try. So that basically settled many things for him.
Right.
The two have had many great associations. Apart from this, the chase of 400, there have been many other partnerships as well.
Right. And in that whole chase of 400, what were the memories there? Because we've not seen too many chases in Test match cricket. I'm sure 2003 changed all that. Again in the West Indies, where we saw that 418 was very easily chased down by West Indies this time against Steve Waugh's rampaging Australians. What was the thought process there in terms of what was their state of mind when they went into that fourth innings at Port of Spain?
See, India had lost the first Test match by an innings. Second was a dawn where India was performing well. Maybe had rain not been there, India might have been able to win it. Now this third Test match at Port of Spain, chasing 400, no one gave a chance to India, including the Indian players. And the thinking was that let's take it one session at a time and let's try to see what happens. Let's try to first think about saving the match. Probably it was like around tea time when 100 odd runs were left. That's when the team really thought, oh, this is we can probably think of winning it.
Right.
And Vishwanath was playing, by the time Gavaskar had been dismissed after scoring a century, but Vishwanath was there, Amarnath was there, and they thought, okay, we can give it a shot. And that's how it transpired.
Right. Because when you have these 400 kind of changes, and the way you said, right, we'll evaluate at tea. I think the two closest such test matches in popular folklore, now that you see it, is the Adelaide test match of 2015, where I think they were 200 out for 2 at tea with Murli Vijay and Virat Kohli batting. Unfortunately, it was like one of those modern day tragedies. India didn't go on to complete the chase. We collapsed. And of course, the great win at Gabba, where, India decided to go for the kill. So that's why I was very curious to know what was the thought process, going in back then. Interesting that was India's, of course, first 400 run chase. I mean, the first, in that era, I think that was a huge target to go and chase.
That was the second time that 400 runs had been chased in a test match. The first was by Sir Don Bradman's team in 1948 at Leeds.
So they were the Invincibles.
India, no one else had.
Right, and so they were called the Invincibles back then, and they chased this 400. So did India have a sense of, because when you win when there's a victory like this, it completely, rejuvenates the opposition, like it happened in Eden Gardens, Kolkata, completely against the run of play, as commentators or anyone watching that series would call. It did a lot of things to Indian cricket. Eden Gardens victory made us believe that we could compete against Australia in that era. But what was your thought process? I mean, did Aunshuman Gaikwad say anything about in the book in terms of what it did to Indian cricket, or do you think there was lack of coverage and as a result, this just petered out?
No, the team was on super high that they had beaten the world champions. Remember, the 1975 World Cup had taken place. They were the official world champions.
Right.
In the one days also. And the Indian team were on high. But what happened after that test match is probably the reason why we don't associate that 400 run chase in the way probably we do the 2001 the Kolkata test match. And the reason was that West Indies had lost in Australia 1-5 just prior to that series against India. Clive Lloyd was worried about his captaincy. And he had declared and given a target of 400 to India. And India chased it. So in the next test match at Sabina Park, Clive Lloyd was livid that, I had given you my bowlers 400 to defend, and against India we were not able to do that. And as a result of all this, the next test match, and which is the theme of the title of the book as well, Guts Amidst Bloodbath. So next test match witnessed bloodbath. All the spinners were taken out. 4 fast bowlers came in, including Michael Holding. And again, Clive Lloyd invited India to bat. Interestingly, again, till about lunchtime, Gavaskar and Aunshuman Gaikwad were unbeaten. So post-lunch, different strategies started. They started bowling bouncers. There were no rules for bouncers that time.
Right.
There was no restriction on bouncers, beamers. They started bowling bouncers, beamers, everything. And then the Indian batsmen tried to complain to the umpire. But nothing was, they didn't do anything about it. And Gavaskar was dismissed by Holding. And then, the batsmen started getting hit everywhere. In that test match, 3 to 4 batsmen got injured.
Oh, wow, that's scary.
Gaikwad, Vishwanath, Brijesh Patel. So it was like, and of course, people who are aware about this test match would know that India had to eventually close their innings at 93 for 5 in the second inning because there was no one left to bat.
Right.
People were in hospital.
Shucks, that's scary to even listen. And I think my only visualization that I can think of is I think when I saw that documentary that they made, I think on Caribbean cricket. I forget the exact name of the documentary, but I think it was in that documentary that I got to see footage of how these bowlers, hit different batsmen, seeing Brian close his chest, having full of blood spots all over. I think that kind of is very, very blood curdling in terms of what to expect. Okay, 93 for 5, and that's very interesting scorecard. But what circumstances led to the innings being closed at 93 for 5?
This happened in the second innings by the time the Indian batsmen had been retired hurt. Aunshuman Gaikwad, Brijesh Patel, Mohinder Amarnath had got some injury, Gundappa Vishwanath had some injury. And in this inning, in the first inning, so before this 97 for 5, Aunshuman Gaikwad was the highest scorer of India's first innings. He scored 81 before getting hit. And as I was telling you, he had a great opening partnership with Gavaskar, more than a century, 136 in fact, they had an opening partnership for. And that's when Clive Lloyd probably felt that things were really getting out of control. He had got 4 fast bowlers, the wicket was a fast one. Sabina Park, that time, one of the quickest wicket in the world.
I remember Sabina Park, Kingston. I think even well into the 90s, it had this glaze, right? You could see the batsman like a mirror on the wicket. And was it the same back then too?
That's absolutely right. I mean, I've heard stories from players who were part of that match that it was like walking on a concrete surface. That was the sound that used to come, and not very good side screens. The Caribbean crowd, they can get really. I mean, they can get under your sleep nerves most of the time, and during that time, the team was on the top. There is an interesting line by Mr. Gavaskar in Sunny Days, uh, where he says that when it was like a boxing ring, is what he says, and there were shouts of "Kill him, man! Knock his head off, Mikey." That's what actually was happening. So Anshuman Gaikwad, and he told me that there was a holding seal all over his body. At the end of the day, when they went back to the dressing room, there was holding seal all over his body. But he stood there. He got hit many times. Of course, there was no way that you could survive not getting hit. You would get hit. He knew that. I mean, something was going to happen. He was going to probably get injured badly, but there was no. He wasn't scared. He was still going on, and he was well set. On 81, he said that he was probably middling the ball well. He had understood, at least somewhat understood what the pace and the bounce of the wicket was. But such was the bowling. And prior to the day that he got injured, there was a ridge that had come up on the surface. And from there, the ball was bouncing very awkwardly. And one ball suddenly rose and hit him on his left ear. He fell down. There was blood everywhere, and the West Indian players, the Indian players immediately came to help him out. The good thing was that he was in his senses. Then he was taken back to the dressing room, then to the hospital, and he has claimed it many times. He's still, that injury isn't cured completely. He still has some problems.
Hearing issues?
Yeah.
It's oh wow, it's scary. Like in the era of unprotected, you don't have too much of protective gear. So for a ball to come whiz past your helmet, I think he also batted with a broken rib. That was I remember reading some match reports in that time. So did that happen during the course of his 81, or is it something that he carried forward into the game?
I think that would probably could have been some other match. In this one, I mean, he was injured all over. It was very difficult for him to even stand there. Forget about scoring runs. Just stand there also needed a lot of bravery, and he did that. And it's a blessing that he was able to come back and play cricket. Remember, Polly Umrigar around in the 60s had got hit by Charlie Griffith in West Indies, and right. Nari Contractor couldn't come back to play Test for India ever again.
Right, I think that sometimes these injuries have lasting, memories that it, is the last time somebody goes and plays cricket. But yeah, in this innings, I think India started and declared at 306 for 6. That was what they did their first innings, right?
So, the scorecard will tell you that India declared. But India did not have anyone to bat. Bishen Singh Bedi and Chandrasekar were the only two batsmen available. And wisely so, Bedi had saved both himself and Chandrasekar for bowling at least. Right. So the scorecard would say that it is declared, and the noted writer Gulu Ezekiel has also come in his book Myths and Busters has given this clarification that India did not declare. India did not have anyone to bat.
Right. But as much as, the thing is made out of difficulty, saying that it's a tough wicket. So when you say tough wicket, let's say when I go back to Barbados 1997, where India were all out for 81, how was a low scoring kind of a ground where runs were tough to get by? Here we're seeing that India scored 306 in their first innings. West Indies replied with 391. But it seems to be a little different narrative for a pitch that is otherwise not so diabolical to the ones we've seen. So are we missing something, or is there more to it than what meets the eye?
See, one very important thing we are missing is that the fast bowler brigade that West Indies had. Yes, the pitch wasn't pitch was difficult, but it wasn't probably as difficult as many of the other pitches that you spoke about. But the kind of bowling that was, I mean, 4 bouncers per over, and beamers coming in, and India did not have fast bowling strength that time to respond to those things.
Right. Right. And I'm also assuming that runs were probably, as much as it's tough to score, when you get runs, you're probably getting boundaries because they're having attacking fields like
That's right.
third man and stuff like that. So runs could have probably come. But yes, I don't think numbers do enough justice to the carnage that was out on display, especially as you say, Clive Lloyd was, gunning for, for his bowlers to basically win the series. And I think there was also a time for, West Indies cricket to become the force it was, because you said they lost 1-5 to Australia. And was it around the same time that Clive Lloyd decided to unleash world domination by his fast bowlers? Was that the same time?
To the best of my knowledge, this was the test match when he decided that
Right.
this is going to be my strategy. That
Right.
I am going to have fast bowlers do it. And we were talking about the pitch and the scores. India had West Indies at 217 for 6. So India, it wasn't very easy but Michael Holding and Holder, and again, those were the time probably Indian team wasn't able to finish the tail in the most desired fashion.
Hey, things haven't changed. Okay, I still have that, sinking feeling whenever India takes 6 wickets or 7 wickets in a test match, that, hey, we'll let this tail bat and, we'll, concede those extra runs. So, yes, memories as an Indian fan, keep haunting you back. But yes, 217 for 6 to 391. I think a very good rearguard innings from Michael Holding. And I think at that point it was Van Burn Holder. But yeah, any memories in terms of, I know India were 306 and they stopped their innings, but did Aunshuman Gaikwad say anything, even in the book, is there any passage on how West Indies approached that same passage, and how was India able to even extract the same amount of mileage as they did? Because we had a completely different attack, right? We had 3 spinners, and then I think we had 2 bowlers who could bowl seam up, which is like Madan Lal and Mohinder Amarnath. Completely contrasting, bowling attacks. So, any thoughts on that? Aunshuman Gaikwad has spoken on.
See, Indians were taken by surprise after chasing that 400, and like we discussed, Indians were on a high, and they thought, okay, we have heard about the West Indian fast bowlers. We have played them. We have chased 400 against them. So there's nothing to worry. But the strategy changed. It wasn't like normal bowling. Many of the players that I spoke to compared it to the Bodyline series. I mean, one of them went on to say that, and I've mentioned in detail about that in the book, that one of them went on to say that till that time we had only heard about Bodyline, but this was like facing it. And India did not have the firepower to give back. We had 3 spinners, 3 quality spinners. And then we had Madan Lal and Mohinder Amarnath, who were seamers, who wouldn't compete with, say, a Michael Holding on pace.
Absolutely. Because when I even saw that thing, right, that to that quartet, you basically had Mohinder Amarnath and you had Madan Lal bowling. It sometimes reminds me of the memes on the internet where you're bringing a pistol to a gunfight, or you're bringing basically water guns to a gunfight. So they're very, very different in terms of how you're countering. But that said, Bhagwat Chandrasekar, I think, still managed to have a 5-wicket haul in that test match.
Yeah, and by the time West Indies started batting, Indians were demoralized. I mean, 3 to 4 batsmen were in the hospital. There were hardly anyone who could come as substitute and field. So it was and Aunshuman Gaikwad had a very serious injury. The rest of the injured folks also were like Brijesh Patel was hit on the chin, on the lips, I think. Vishwanath had a fractured hand. So things were not hunky-dory, and I mean, people were thinking about life and death. Cricket was probably not the thing on top of their mind.
Right. But I think it's good that you brought about this, because I still think for a lot of us 80s, 90s kids, we didn't have access to cricket footage. We're so much dependent on, first person tales or second person tales of, what happened. Because as I mentioned earlier in the podcast, it looks like a seminal moment. You've chased 400, but the joy of chasing a 400 is just pounded by Clive Lloyd's fury into what is metamorphosized as what we saw in Fire in Babylon. And what I saw there was really scary. So I can understand, despite the fact that 400 runs were scored, what was the quality of bowling on display, and given the fact that you didn't have protective gear back in those days. So I think that makes for very interesting memories. And was it that he's Aunshuman Gaikwad, for all you listeners, actually had this moniker of being called the Great Wall. So, as much as the wall, okay, is associated with Rahul Dravid, this is something I think he was probably the original wall, as you know, we were discussing earlier. When did this moniker come about? Did this come about because of this series, or was it much earlier?
No, this came about after this series only. I think after this series, people started relating words like wall. Someone called him Maharana Pratap. He was called Gutsy. Even today, whomsoever I have spoken for this book, if I ask them what is the one thing that comes to your mind when you think about Aunshuman Gaikwad, guts. That's the thing that people tell about him. So the wall thing came about after this series.
Right, and I think for that era, Aunshuman Gaikwad, for somebody who was, I think he played about 40 odd test matches. He had an average of about 30. Because I remember someone like Sachin Tendulkar or Srikanth, I think for that time they were averaging 28, 26. So 30 is, I think, a fairly good average for that time. And I think he passed 50 about 12 times in a 70 innings career. So I think for somebody who came in the middle order and was not looked at as the main batsman, I think that's something fairly decent, right?
Absolutely. And see, before I answer your question, I think including me, every one of us are very impressed with numbers and all. But cricket is beyond these numbers, of course. And I, based on whatever I have heard, I have not seen him play. I wasn't even born during that time. But based on whatever I have heard, numbers don't do justice to his career. And the second thing is about the averages that you were talking about. Remember that time only Mr. Gavaskar had a very good average of above 50.
Absolutely, which is why I was just correcting those averages to that time.
Yeah.
Just like you do this purchasing power parity math. Yeah, so correcting it back to the time to say 30 is actually a very decent average for that era. So it's not the 30 that you see today, because if Ajinkya Rahane today has an average of 28 or 30, then you say, okay, fine, this is not good enough for a top order or top 6 batsman. So yeah, I think that's something that that I looked at numbers to say that, okay, that's a very good average to have back then. Okay, so largely we've seen Aunshuman Gaikwad, especially my era, has seen him as somebody who runs a team, as a team manager. So, do you have any interesting tales from the times that we can relate to as him being a team manager? I personally wanted to ask about the wonder years. I call it the wonder years because I was so happy trying to see a dominating Indian team. And this was, I think, around 97, 98, where India basically won close to 8-9 ODI Cup titles. It could be either of the colas, it could be a Coca-Cola Cup or a Pepsi Cup, but they won quite a lot that year. So, what are Aunshuman Gaikwad's memories of that particular phase of Indian cricket? And I think he came back also again as a manager or a coach, right?
That's
two times.
Yeah. So let's take the first phase, 97-98, and you spoke about either of the colas. So let's talk about the most famous cola cup that we remember, the Desert Storm, Coca-Cola Cup Sharjah. There are, in the book we have mentioned about the other trophies as well, other tournaments as well. But this was a phenomenal tournament, and one might think, even while talking to him, and I posed this question as well, the team had Tendulkar probably in the best of his form. I don't think he had a better year than 98 ever. And so what was the role of a coach in that? You have the world's best batsman who is in his best form. There is Saurav Ganguly who is coming up. Azharuddin as a captain was doing pretty well that time, and the bowling was well settled. So does the coach have a role to play? That's when talking to Sachin Tendulkar also and other players also, they acknowledge the fact that as a coach, Aunshuman Gaikwad wasn't talking about that, okay, hold the bat like this, or talking about the very basic, unless he observed something was wrong. His role was more of a mental thing. So I'll just narrate a very small incident, and details much more are there in the book as well. During the Coca-Cola Cup, after Tendulkar's first century 141 in that when India qualified for the finals, while going back to the hotel, Aunshuman Gaikwad sits with Sachin Tendulkar and tells him that you have to go do it again in the final. And Sachin Tendulkar, being the man that he is, that I'll try my best. Next to next day morning when they're going for the final, again Aunshuman Gaikwad sits with Sachin Tendulkar, tells him that you have to perform today. And Sachin is like, I'll go and score. You don't worry. So these are the small things which might feel very small, that to tell the Tendulkar, I mean, he's going to score anyway. But a coach could have, many other coaches might have handled it differently. So he knew what his role was. He just had to probably give a little more motivation. And another interesting thing about that particular series, so you remember in the first match, Tendulkar had a very good partnership with Lakshman. Lakshman's role was just to...
Right. You mean the April 22nd game, the one that was the last game before the qualification? Huh?
Before the qualification. No, Lakshman's role was totally different. So Aunshuman Gaikwad sat with Lakshman, had a totally different conversation. That you just have to stay there. And that was fine. That is what one would expect from any coach.
But and I must say, Lakshman actually followed it to the T, because one, he stayed till the fact that Tendulkar passed 236. That was the target, I think, that India had to score in terms of the run rate to go beyond New Zealand. But after Tendulkar got out, VVS Lakshman with whoever else, I think it was Kanitkar who batted. 13 runs were scored in 4 overs. And the kind of ecstasy I was in, especially with this cover drive that Tendulkar hits off Damien Fleming. And I heard Tony Greig exclaim saying he's going for the target. The kind of emotions that run through your mind, and you're looking at a very different India. You're suddenly thinking that yes, we can win. And then all of a sudden, 13 or 4 overs, I felt, why, man, why? But yes, he followed the instructions to the T. He was developing as a player. But yes, that's an interesting tale. Very important that Lakshman stayed there, because if he had probably not, then Tendulkar would not have had partners, and it could have been a case of the 99 test match that happened. Of course, it was red ball format, but of course we remember the 99 test match. Each of these matches are a scar. Luckily, this was a beautiful memory. Of course, the 1998 3 days madness in the desert, April 22nd to April 24th. So these are days that are earmarked in childhood. Of course, it's very important that Aunshuman Gaikwad spoke to each of these players, and then they were able to put their roles. Any other interesting?
And after the match, when the entire nation was going gaga over Tendulkar, it was only Tendulkar. I mean, we won't recall also that a certain VVS Lakshman was there at the other end. Post the match, in the team meeting, Aunshuman Gaikwad points at Lakshman and says that this chap did the job that we asked him to do, which was a big thing for Lakshman. Lakshman wasn't the VVS Lakshman that we know him today. He wasn't the big star. For a youngster who was just playing a support cast to Tendulkar, to be acknowledged in front of the team when everyone knows that Tendulkar is the person who has taken India home, just to acknowledge, just a statement that you did your job and we should acknowledge that as well, was a big thing.
Absolutely. And I think it's nice that, India had these kind of gatherings, because we've now come to see like Delhi Capitals or Mumbai Indians, put it on their social media pages where there's this huddle and people put individual man of the matches, within the team. So it's nice that such a thing was there. And I think this is where my next question comes, because as you said rightly, that there's only so much that a coach can add, which is, talk to a player. There is a psychological aspect which never seems to leave aside. There's like a DNA that's already embedded, and even before a coach can come in. Like with RCB, me and my friends were discussing, there's some DNA where they start very well, they get choked in the middle, and then the calculators have to get out. So like that, India also was in that phase, I think in pre-97, where I think 97, the only good tournament that they had was the Sahara Cup. And they were coming off a series of losses when Aunshuman Gaikwad probably took over. When was it exactly that he took over? I don't exactly recall the series.
So this was just after the 4-nation tournament in Sharjah, India, England, West Indies, 97, and Tendulkar was removed as the captain. So the entire scenario when Aunshuman Gaikwad comes in as the coach, his best batsman and captain has been removed from the captaincy. Azharuddin is suddenly back as the captain. And apart from all these things, he had to manage superstars. Azharuddin was a star. Tendulkar was there. You had Anil Kumble, Javgal Srinath. These 4 were big stars in the Indian team. And we all know that people have egos, stars have their egos. To manage that team was a commendable job that he did.
Right, absolutely. And are there any other stories that, talks about how psychologically he was able to see a shift in that Indian side? Because this is a remarkable shift, right? 97 December. Mm-hmm. I remember we lost all the 3 games in that tri-series in Sharjah, against Pakistan, against England, and against West Indies. And then we tied a series in India. I think we were playing Sri Lanka. That's where I think one of the pitches was called as diabolical.
That was his first series.
That was his first series. Okay. So Tendulkar started off as captain, I think, there, and I think we lost a game at Madgaon and then one game at Guwahati. I remember Robin Singh taking a 5-wicket haul back then.
Yeah.
So okay, started off then, and then of course it's been a meteoric rise back then, where India in January won that Independence Cup, then had an amazing series in Australia, and in fact I'm curious here, India won a Test series against Australia, and very nearly made it. Won that Pepsi series, but we lost in the final thanks to Steve Waugh playing a great knock. Mm-hmm. But that series is less talked about as opposed to, let's say, the 2001 series, which is seen as a seminal series. Did Aunshuman Gaikwad have any such thoughts about the importance of that series?
Yeah, that series he considered as one of the best moments. And 98, you would recall that it was Battle of Tendulkar versus Vaughan. Absolutely. Tendulkar had gotten Lakshman Srivaramakrishnan, practiced with him against him in the nets in order to prepare for facing Vaughan. And again, like I was telling in Sharjah, in Chennai also, Aunshuman Gaikwad had a similar discussion with Tendulkar, and Tendulkar scored that famous 155 in the second inning. So that series he really thinks as one of the high points of his career, because it was a very strong Australian side. And absolutely. In the third Test match, India lost.
It was personally one of my low points of my life, because Tendulkar was scoring that 155 10 kilometers from where I was. I had a science revision exam to prepare for my board exams, 10th board exams. And that was the first bad decision that I very vividly recall, saying, how can I miss that 155 knock? Especially the way he handled Gavin Robertson and Shane Warne around the wicket. And of course, a little bit of Darren Lehman too. I just felt so bad on missing that 100 out, but of course it was an epic 100, 155 at Chennai. And yes, over to you in terms of what Aunshuman Gaikwad observed.
So overall, there were few things that when he had taken up, he had seen. So Aunshuman Gaikwad is a very methodical person. He will, his approach has been that he will listen the players out. His thing is not, it's my way or the highway. He's not one of those coaches who will say, just follow what I say. So he would listen to the coaches. He had an excellent rapport with both Azharuddin and Tendulkar. So those are the two biggest players in the team. Azhar is the captain. And he would pass on the suggestions, what needs to be done. If something is there which Azhar might have missed, he would point it out. And all of these people had a very healthy relationship. So first was that they respected him as a person. So one thing for the listeners here, that Aunshuman Gaikwad had also a stint as a selector prior to becoming the coach. Between 94 to 96, he was a selector. So he had travelled within the country, knew who the upcoming players were, and these people. So Azharuddin incidentally played Azharuddin's debut match at Calcutta was Aunshuman Gaikwad's last Test match. So the two go long way back,
right?
And they have a very good rapport. Similarly, Tendulkar has played Ranji Trophy with Aunshuman Gaikwad, and they have all heard stories about him in West Indies, how he used to bat without helmet, etc. So they all respected him. So they were ready to listen to what his suggestions were. And second was, he was never imposing those things on him. He wanted a very healthy kind of atmosphere. Yes, there were certain things which he was very particular about. If he wanted discipline, he wanted discipline. If he wanted proper practice time, people should come on time, etc. He would ensure that. But he would never impose himself on others. That created a very healthy team atmosphere, is what I heard from many of the cricketers that I spoke to.
Got it. I'm going to allow you to come back to that in a minute, because I'm just trying to recall thoughts from that era. Because this is exactly the time when Australia opted for coaches who were slightly offbeat. In the sense that, coaches had that persona coming into a series that they were the leaders and they were controlling the team. It was their team. Like, I think a little later you had John Buchanan also coming. Somebody without having the credentials of saying that, hey, I faced, balls from Michael Holding in Savaira Park. Somebody who's not played, professional cricket or got hurt or got, because Australia transitioned from Bobby Simpson to someone like, John Buchanan. And there, the role of the coach was kind of larger than life. Because in football, you also have these things in the football managers and coaches, where the coach has a more imposing presence. But I think in India, we saw that with Greg Chappell. But yes, I think around this time when Aunshuman Gaikwad came, it was good that he had, I think, the support of the team management at that point. I don't think we had foreign coaches yet. Because I think India had transitioned from Kapil Dev or Madan Lal, or who was it? 96 Sandeep Patil, right?
So the total chronology is Madan Lal, then Aunshuman Gaikwad came in. Then Aunshuman Gaikwad was replaced by Kapil Dev after the 99 World Cup. Then the whole match fixing thing came up, and post that again Aunshuman Gaikwad was called back. After Aunshuman Gaikwad's second stint in Nairobi, that's when John Wright came into
John Wright came. I think that's good to know that transition. But in between here, I think you should go back. I suddenly spotted one keyword, and I think that's very important for me to ask as a fan, because most cricketers don't mention this on their books. But I'll come to that. But yeah, over to you in terms of what more did Aunshuman Gaikwad set as the team culture? Because in 1998, to change the psychology of a team, to believe that it could start winning, and that 98 series that I was talking about was very important. So any other notes from that series in terms of what Aunshuman Gaikwad observed?
So overall, he had felt when he became the coach, he had been connected with Indian cricket, he had been following. He felt that the team was pretty good. It was a talented bunch of folks. But however, they were not performing when it mattered in the crunch situation. So he tried to explain those things, and he laid a lot of emphasis on net practice, etc. So he was like, it has to be taken seriously, and he had specific roles for each people. So even if we talk about Nayan Mungia coming in as a pinch hitter in Sharjah. These were, I wouldn't say that it might be wrong to say that it was just Aunshuman Gaikwad who would have brought this idea, but it was a team management decision. But in between, when some other matches are going on or some practice games are going on, he would keep on repeating and asking these people that there is a role that is there for you in the team. The situation might come later on, but you have to be prepared. So it's like relating it to his own career. Suddenly he was asked to open. No one told him that, oh, you have this much preparation time. Probably a day or two before he was asked to come and open the inning. So he was like, you have to be prepared. You are playing for India, and that's the job that you are doing. So you have to be prepared, and the moment can come anytime. So Nayan Mungia did it in Sharjah. Again, Nayan Mungia almost did it in Chennai, in the Chennai Test match against Pakistan.
Right. Because when you said Sharjah, right, I sort of got kind of confused, because Nayan Mungia's role there was a pinch hitter at 3. Exactly. At Chennai, yes, I still have that scars. At 218 for 6, had Mungia not played that shot of Wasim slower ball, could the match have been different? I always tend to rewind these cricket match situations and, dream how the game could have gone. But yes, I think that's a very important part of, giving these very specific roles, because India at that point, I very rarely have seen any kind of experimentation coming, pre-1996. Mungia was always a number 7 batsman who would come score a 20-30. And I think I was, as a fan, was very happy trying to see Nayan Mungia score those runs, because it deflected a lot of pressure off Sachin Tendulkar. Because in both the games, I think Saurav Ganguly got out, fairly early. And it was Mungia who took the score till about the 20th over, where, we were about 105, 5.5 and over. Yeah. And it was important for that base to be built. I think that definitely must have helped Tendulkar, of course, feel a lot more confident about it, about managing or finishing games.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Right.
Absolutely.
So, any memories from that, again going back to the test series, any memories from that test series in terms of what was conceptualized? Because when Australia came, Australia weren't the bulwark that we, used them to be. When they came in 2001, when they came again much later, I think they had this streak of 15-16 test matches that they were winning. But here's a side that was always regarded as a great side. They, of course, had, upset the apple cart by beating West Indies in 1995. So they were the kings, but not quite the invincibles back then. So what was the preparation going into the series? I know Tendulkar had this specific preparation to play leg spin. Was there anything else that Aunshuman Gaikwad recalls from that series?
So one of the things that he recalls having a lot of discussion with Azharuddin, and in the book we have quoted specific incidents where he had those incidents, where how they planned dismissals of various Australian batsmen. So India had Anil Kumble, Venkatraghavan and Rajesh Chauhan as the 3 spinners. Of course, Jagal Srinath was there, but largely it was a spin-dominated series. So he had specific plans. They would chalk out specific plans for each Australian batsman, what needed to be done, and by and large they were successful in getting the Australians out during that time. So overall, he had planned it out. One of the things that he did even during that time. See, those are the times you called him the manager. His official role was the coach, but he was essentially the manager. He had to do everything, right from ensuring that how people are going for say sightseeing to arranging nets. He had to do it. He had few people to help him, but everything was being done by him. So one additional thing that he did, and probably the '98 series, it must have really helped is he used to take out recordings of the play, so it was not easily available as today.
I was about to actually ask that, because when you said he planned dismissals and stuff like that, I remember it's a very interesting episode where Ashwin, speaks about how Shastri saw videos and said that we have to basically make Steve Smith bat on the leg side such that you're cutting off his, offside scoring region. So those era when you didn't have videos, how would they go about approaching? And yes, I'm curious to see.
So he used to have go to the official broadcaster in the stadium, and probably Doordarshan used to be there at most of the time. Ask them for the recording. Assign a person that I want say a Tendulkar, this phase to this phase. Give me the complete recording. He would in the night he would just sit and watch those, prepare his notes, and then next day tell that this is what I have observed. And again, he won't say that this is what you are doing. He say this is what I have observed. Do you think this is what is happening? And I have seen his diary that he maintained. He later on also became the coach of Gujarat Ranji team. So I have seen the diary that he maintained for Gujarat team, and the notes where it was absolutely precise, particular point where people are going wrong, and I've had detailed discussion with Parthiv Patel on it, who gave many instances when just looking at recordings he would identify the issues and then come back to Parthiv Patel and say, just see if this is where you are going wrong.
Right. It's interesting that this was the precursor to the digital era that would eventually follow, where I think the then Indian first video analyst, which was I think Ramki, in fact was somebody who was a coach in my school.
Interesting.
In Vidya Mandir Adayar in Chennai, and that's how we've known him. And he, I think in 2003 was the time that he met John Wright and tried convincing, and then the video analyst also started to travel along. So that's an interesting recollection. Okay, so that was Aunshuman Gaikwad's observations as a coach that we saw around 1998. But going back to an earlier question that you said, you used the word match fixing. Now, I've read many cricket books and no cricketer actively talks about what happened in that era. Because going by, let's say, a Justice Qayyum report, or going by Pradeep Magazine's book, where he spoke about, in that book, Not Quite Cricket, where he speaks about the kind of approaches, of course, the Tehelka report that's again blown up on Netflix recently. I'm curious to understand what were his thoughts or observations, and is it covered in the book?
It definitely is covered in the book. At length, it is covered. What at least his feelings are on match fixing. The whole episode came in 2000 when Hansi Kronia was the Delhi police got Hansi Kronia and all this came up. That was after he had already been he was not the coach of the team that time. However, it is human to think, what happened during my time. But we spoke about the results. India was winning during his time, 97, 98 was India won so many tournaments. So there wasn't anything that he would be thinking that could be going wrong in the team. Secondly, the biggest stamp of integrity on him, and he has what all, at least there could be people who might ask that whether he's saying the truth or not. He was called back as the coach of the team post the match fixing thing.
Sure, I'm not at all. Okay, again, his integrity, not at all questioning, okay? And of course, I think that's probably why he came back the second time, in that era. But I'm just curious if he's heard rumors of match fixing going on around that time. Because I very, very vividly remember there was this interview where I think somewhere in a book I read, somebody came and told Aunshuman Gaikwad that this game is fixed. And Anshuman Gaikwad went to Tendulkar and said, "Boss, this game is fixed. I need you to win this for us." And I think this was the Nidahas Trophy in August 1998, around that time. And Tendulkar won. I think this was the game that we scored that double hundred odd opening, 250 odd opening partnership with Saurav and Sachin. So that's what I mean. Is that true? Did Anshuman Gaikwad hear this thing that this game is fixed?
Yes, he did, and the details of it are there in the book. You have, and I mean, the whatever you mentioned is already there, available on, I think, either in one of the interviews, or it had come out in one of the articles few years back. The details of it, his side, and what all happened is there. So readers can definitely read it and see at least what he felt and what are the things that happened during that time. And his thoughts are very clear, that at least during his time it was pretty clean, because whatever was being discussed in the team, nothing, it was same thing was being followed by the players on the ground. So there wasn't anything to think about. And 98, no one was, the word match fixing was not at all there. It came after probably around 2000 itself. So everything was going on fine. Yes, the incident that you talked about was taken seriously, and there are details about it, what all things were done as a, post that particular incident.
Right. I think even my first really recording of or understanding that match fixing is happening was probably when Outlook ran a piece, I think in 1996, where this was also the time that Manoj Prabhakar was out of the Indian team, and then they said that we know that match fixing is happening, and then there was this reference to this game in 1994. I think this was the tournament, four-nation tournament, where Tendulkar scored his first ODI 100. So that Prashant Vaidya heard the conversation and stuff like that. But yes, I think there was a lot of chatter in that time that these cricketers had access to a lot of dubious people around. So is there any note again in the book where it talks about the access levels that cricketers had with the then journalists or with people who were not supposed to be around with the team? Is there anything that Anshuman Gaekwad covered?
Specific. At least, so 94, he was of course not the coach, and during 97, 98, during his tenure, there isn't any specific incident where he had observed anyone who was not supposed to be around, at least to the best of my knowledge. What I would only say about the rest of the details are there in the book about what he feels about match fixing and all. He has tried to be candid about what he feels. He has no way to go and check what happened prior to him or post his time. During his time, he has reflected back. He has given it a thought around what happened, whether this incident was right, that incident was wrong. And after that, he has given his views, which I think the readers can read and see, which I felt was pretty candid. And like you said, there aren't many people who would talk about it as openly as he has done.
Right. And now coming back to, I think, the end of Anshuman Gaikwad's first stint as a coach, and we'll probably have a couple of more questions before we'll, end the podcast, the inaugural edition. I'm just curious to understand any conversation between him and Sachin when Sachin Tendulkar's father expired. And because for us, as a lot of Indian fans back then, it pained to learn that Sachin Tendulkar, has lost his father. Then he goes all the way to India, finishes the last rites, and comes back again, in England, and a very emotional moment when he scored that 100 at the Bristol ground against Kenya. So, are there any notes about that that he speaks about that he can recall as first person notes?
Yeah, that entire incident has been at length discussed in the book. What I would just say is that he tried to be as supportive as possible to Tendulkar. Of course, Tendulkar was inconsolable. He had lost his father. And when Tendulkar came back also, he tried to talk things to Tendulkar, but there is a limit to which you can talk cricket when such a thing has happened. So there is the human angle, and he tried his level best talking to Tendulkar in whichever way he felt that would at least make him feel little less sad. He tried his level best, and what all when his father expired and how the entire thing was arranged, and what all things Anshuman Gaikwad did is there in the book. He used to be in touch with Tendulkar's brother Ajit to know what the next plan is, etc. And then when Tendulkar came back in the team, he tried that he will ensure that to the best that he can do that he is able to at least calm down Tendulkar, and he tried that, but it was a tough situation for everyone.
Right. And any particular note of what was the team management's decision to that was the year I think Tendulkar batted at number 4. It was kind of a very unfamiliar spot for us to see Sachin Tendulkar bat at that low down. But yes, any thoughts on that in white ball cricket? How it transpired?
I think again the thing was like we all could can what we have read, like he was the mainstay, and so the thing was that he would take care of the top order and the lower middle order as well. He would be with them. That was the whole thought process to have him in the middle order, which of course did not work out as people would have thought. But that was how the overall the team management thought that this would work, and Tendulkar also agreed to it. But later on, of course, came back as an opener, and we all know how he again was back in form.
Right. Since we just spoke about 1999, another thing that comes to mind, which is again another scar of my childhood, was of course the Chennai Test match of 1999. So, anything that Anshuman Gaikwad recalls in terms of the diplomacy that was required, Pakistan's coming to India for the first time in I think 10 years back then, 89 to 99, and then there's a series build up having happening in Chennai, which is of course one of the coldest times in Chennai, because Chennai is otherwise known as this hot boiling cauldron. What was the mood getting into the series and then in that series?
It was pretty tough. I mean, prior to the series, we all would remember that it was more political than cricket. There were so many discussions. You would remember that Firozshah Kotla had been dug up.
Absolutely, yes.
It was very difficult, and Anshuman Gaikwad as a coach tried his best to ensure that the team remains focused on what is happening on the ground. There was a lot of things happening off the ground. They had to go in so many different receptions and functions just because the Pakistan team was here. Right from the government officials, everyone wanted that it has to be done properly. So it was very difficult to maintain the focus, but he did it. And I think the team, we just lost the Chennai Test match, but we came back and won the Delhi Test match when Kumble took those 10 wickets. So his role was basically to see that the players are focused, focus remains on cricket.
Right. And it was also a phase where, and that's where I just want to know a little bit of detail, which is why I'm trying to dig this up more. From a test match standpoint, or rather from Jan 1999, as you go towards June 1999, Indian cricket declined. And when I say declined, because I think we did very well early on, in the sense we won the Kotla Test match with 10 wickets, but we lost Chennai and we lost the supposed third test, which was the Asian Test Championship against Pakistan in Kolkata. Riots, literally, in terms of people not wanting to go watch the test match, or pelting. And then, of course, you had that tri-series where India performed fairly badly. Yes, they did beat Sri Lanka, but it was a bad, and they again lost badly in the tri-series. Just scraped through England. They made it to a final, but it was very clear which was the dominant side. India, went into a World Cup low on confidence, losing 2 one-day series, and then we went into a World Cup where I think a few moments of madness where Tendulkar was not there against Henry Olonga cost us. So, what is his thought process or emotion in terms of the decline? Because we've seen that sometimes during the end of a coach's tenure, sometimes things go off the boil. We saw that with John Wright too. Despite all of the highs, we ended up losing a series after leading 2-0. We lost 2-4. 4 games on the bounce we lost against Pakistan. It was a home series. We lost that series, and that's how John Wright, departed the scene. So, is there anything that Anshuman Gaikwad talks about in terms of not having a happy ending when it comes to that tenure?
See, firstly, like it is in today's time, people are given a tenure that you are there for X number of years, 1 year, 2 year, or whatever the period is. During that time, his assignment was series to series. So he didn't know at the end of the series whether he would be there after the series. He was removed a few months after the 99 World Cup. And I think after the World Cup, first Azharuddin was removed as the skipper. And then after a few months, Anshuman Gaikwad was removed. of the say Chennai Test match or the other setback of losing against Zimbabwe in the World Cup, he was sad. He was dejected because, as per him, the team had planned very well. Their preparation was very good, and they had it not been for that Zimbabwe match, we would have been in the semi-finals. And after that, it was just a matter of 2 games. You never know what could have happened. So he is disappointed, like the other players or like the fans. He is also disappointed, and one of the reasons was that he was like, everything has been done the way it was supposed to. Still, we didn't get the result. So Chennai Test match was lost. The team was absolutely dejected, and fans were crying. The team was also dejected. You would recall that Tendulkar had refused to go to the presentation ceremony to pick the man of the match, and Aunshuman Gaikwad had gone on his behalf to pick the man of the match. So such was the disappointment within the team. But immediately he had to, motivate them that they perform well in the Delhi Test match. So it was like he couldn't just sulk that team is doing bad. That there is something that needs to be done. Of course, results are not in anyone's control, but your preparation is, and that's what he always believes in preparation. So if the preparation has been good and the team probably just lost, then it's fine. Yes, there were moments where we could have taken it on. For example, when we spoke about when Nayan Mungia got out. So I'm sure he must have been livid with Nayan Mungia. That why did you have to play a shot like that?
Was there any Baroda slang said to Nayan Mungia in a very Baroda way?
I'm not aware of those things. So probably could have been.
Right. Sure. I think, that, to me, I'm just trying to draw that parallel because that happened. But I think what I'm going to do is, I think once your book releases, which is, I think, in the next 15 days, is when your book is about to release?
May 19th it is going to be.
May 19th. Okay. So once the book releases, I'm also going to go read the book and then do a separate podcast with you where we're going to speak on separate instances. But we've done well to rewind back the era. Because this is an era where we've not known much, and I'm also happy to read and then see, okay, what is it that we can gather in terms of cricket stories. It's been great trying to, have this conversation to go launch my first podcast as such, as well as show. I intend to basically have a lot of cricket nostalgia conversations, and who better to have? As I said, you're like the Robolinda for literature nostalgia, having written 3 cricket books. It was great having you on the show. And I'm looking forward and wishing you the best of luck. Why don't you end the show by talking maybe a couple of details about the book? Where can people basically access it?
Yeah, so the book is titled as Guts Amidst Bloodbath, and it would be available on Amazon pretty soon. May 19th is when it is getting launched. And although over the course of last few minutes or an hour we have spoken about various things, overall, this book is a celebration of Aunshuman Gaikwad, the man. So, how a boy from Baroda, he started his first class career in around 1969, and we are in 2023. He is still associated with the game in some form or the other, in some official form. I'm not talking about the media assignments or the commercial assignment, but in an official role. He is today the president of Indian Cricketers Association. So, he has been with Indian cricket in some role or the other for the last 50 years. He was also the Gujarat coach in 2012-13 after he had been the Indian team's coach. Not many people would take up that responsibility after being the national coach to take a state coach, because there isn't anything that he's going to do. But that has been his way. That's the man that he is, that whenever there is a need and people need him, he has come up and raised his hand that, okay, I'll do it for you. That's the entire book is about that. As far as possible, we have tried that. He has been a remarkable career. Many say that it could have been better, but no regrets, and I think that's the essence of it. He is happy with his involvement in Indian cricket for the last 50 years.
Right, and we wish you all the best. May 19th is when the book is about to come. But before we go, a little quiz for you. May 19th is also an important date in Indian cricket history. Are you able to recall any one particular match? Because this is one match which we've discussed maybe in the last 10 minutes. Do you recall which famous game happened on May 19th?
Is it the India Zimbabwe?
It was the India Zimbabwe game at Leicester, where I think those few moments of madness of the way Venkatesh Prasad, Chavagal Srinath played Henry Olonga cost us a place in the '99 World Cup, and potentially Aunshuman Gaikwad a few more months or years of position as the Indian cricket coach. Slash manager at that point of time. It is at this note that we will end the first edition. Thank you, Aditya, for graciously accepting to come on the podcast. I had a lovely time trying to have this first edition.
Thanks a lot, Karthik. It was a pleasure to be here, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And thanks a lot to you for giving me this opportunity in your first podcast.
Sure.
And I would go back to Aunshuman Gaikwad and remind him that May 19th, this is what happened, and today we are releasing the book.
Sure, you should. And I'd love to have another conversation with you once the book is released, where I think fans will probably invite a couple of more fans. We could have a more larger discussion where we speak about memories. But yes, thanks for rewinding 1976 to 1999, where we've gone through a plethora of memories. And for subscribers, this is of course the first edition of this podcast. If you did like it, please do subscribe. Please do consider subscribing. And if you have any interesting stories or anecdotes that you feel you want Aditya to answer, please do mention it in the comments box. We will try to reply to it, or we will have a separate podcast that I was talking about post the book being released. Thanks everyone for your time. Thanks for all your support.